Today, I'm going to share a story with you that may be ill-advised to talk about on YouTube because we live in this fantasy world where everything's perfect and nobody ever makes mistakes. And to tell you a story about probably the most catastrophic mistake I've ever made in the fish keeping hobby might make me look bad. But I don't mind that because I think it's important to share with you not only the successes that we have in this hobby, but also the mistakes that we make. That way you can learn through us. Today's story is a doozy, so while I'm working around here in the fish room, I'm going to share it with you. Oh boy, let's go. This isn't the first time I've shared this story. I've talked about it on a live stream. I've talked about it, pretty much anybody that ever wants to hear the story, I tell them about it. But I had a 150-gallon aquarium back in the day. We used to have it in our fish store. It was a South American tank for a while. I did a video showing the Oscar, which is a different Oscar than what I have now, the Red Devils that were in there, as well as a Florida Gar. There was a Jack Dempsey. There was a whole bunch of fish in there. Well, that tank became a African cichlid tank when we moved it back to our house after we shut the shop down. We put all of our aquariums in our basement. I set up an adorable little studio in there, and that's where it was. And it was kind of hidden back in the corner of the basement. I loved it. It was great. There was like 50 fish in there. They were big peacocks, haps, and bunas. We even had a couple of Tanganyikans in there. Go ahead and yell at me if you want. But we had an assortment of fish in there, and these were big. Some of these fish were from the very first batch of peacocks that we bred back in 2010. So needless to say, this tank had fish in it that were very sentimental to us, and this is where the catastrophe happened. Now, we all have moments in our lives where things get a little bit out of hand. We lose track of the things that we typically do every single day. And that happened to me back in 2000, who knows, I don't know when it was, 2016, it was 2017 when this happened. Like I said, we had all of the tanks down in the basement, and I had to give up on this dream that is YouTube and the fish industry and go back to my other business that I had, which was fixing furniture, which took me out of the house for 70 or so hours per week. It was grueling. I made good money, but it was grueling. One of the things that happened was I didn't give as much attention to my aquariums as I probably should have because I was busy. I was out of the house 70, 80 hours a week. It was nuts. Lisa could tell you it was crazy. Well, there was a particular time, it's Big Fella from Extreme, in case you're wondering, and I'm also going to throw a little nano in there for the little fry that are down at the bottom. I'll see if I can get you some footage of those. Now that we put these rocks in here, there's fry everywhere, and it's adorable. But I was out of the house a lot, and I didn't intentionally neglect my aquariums, but they weren't getting the attention that they really should have had. And that's what made this problem happen. There was a particular span of about 2 weeks where I got way behind on my maintenance. I was overwhelmed with my job. Something had to go, right? I mean, we've all had those moments where, like I said earlier, you get off of your normal routine because life gets in the way of that routine. All of a sudden, your hours are turned upside down. There's not enough hours in the day to do what you need to do, and that definitely happened to me. There was a particular time where it was just, I was completely overwhelmed, and I was losing it a little bit, and neglecting my aquariums. And now, it's not like I didn't even look at them. I was not going down there and doing the amount of work that needed to be done to keep the fish healthy, keep everybody happy, and keep me sane. I wasn't able to get down there and do that. It was a particular stretch of like 3 days where I wasn't able to go down there at all. And this is the part that is the most embarrassing for me. I was so exhausted and so overwhelmed from work that I didn't even take the time to go down and check on my fish. I mean, listen, you might criticize me for saying this, but it's an absolute fact. Your fish can go a couple days without eating. They can. They're not going to die of starvation after a couple of days. But if you start to get to that place where you're 3-4 days out, things can start to go a little squirrely. The fish are going to start looking for food in places that they wouldn't typically look for food. And you're thinking that this story is going to be that all of my fish ate each other. No, it's worse than that. So like I said, it's been a few days. Things are getting out of control. Oh. It was a few days where I was completely neglecting these aquariums. I didn't even see them at all. And like I said, normally that would be okay. But it's okay as long as your equipment doesn't fail. And that's what happened in this story. In this tank, like I said, there was 40 or 50 fish in it. Large, big, fully grown peacocks, haps, and bunas, Tanganyikans. Like I said, some of them very sentimental to me. And I didn't know this, but the filter failed. It just quit. I still have it. It works perfectly fine. But at that particular time, for whatever reason, it just died. I don't know why. I mean, I ended up taking it apart and cleaning it all out, and it works perfectly fine now. But here's the thing. Because I was so preoccupied with my life, I didn't know that this happened. And it probably happened very early in my stint of not checking on these fish. So the filter dies out. You got 50 fish in there. I'm just going to say 50. I don't know how many were in there. A lot of fish in there with a dead filter, with no movement in the water, and you're not doing anything to maintain it. What do you think happened? The ammonia spiked, the fish start getting mad at each other, and all hell broke loose in the tank. And all of this happened, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know that this happened. I didn't know that the fish were struggling. I didn't know that the fish were suffocating, that the ammonia was spiking, that everything was going crazy. I didn't know because I wasn't checking. But after a few days, like I said, neglect on my part, I was upstairs and I started, something doesn't smell right. You know what that smell is. It smelled fishy. It smelled like dead fish. It smelled like you go down to the docks where there's a bunch of dead fish everywhere. You know that smell. We all know that smell. And I said, why is this happening? And I went downstairs, and in that 150-gallon tank, all but one of the fish were dead. Why were they dead? Because the filter went out. There was no movement in the water. The water was stagnant, lack of oxygen in the water, ammonia spike, all of that perfect storm. And with that many fish in there, producing the volume of waste that many fish causes or creates, it was a death sentence for all of those fish. And it was one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. Now, I was on a break from YouTube at the time, so it's not like I pulled out my camera and got footage of it. Even if I was active on YouTube at the time, I would not have done that. Because, why? I'm not going to be one of those guys that shows dead fish to get views on YouTube. That's not going to happen on this channel. So even if I was active at the time, I would have handled this the exact same way I did. I had to remove all of those fish, try not to vomit because of the absolutely intense smell that was coming from almost 50 dead fish. And I had to dispose of those fish. And I mean, I basically shut the tank down. I was like, well, there's nothing I can do here now. I mean, I'm super busy with my life. I've made this critical mistake. All of these fish are dead. Some that had immense sentimental value to me are gone. It's my fault. This might be where I just give up on this hobby. It was a dark, dark time, as you can imagine. But it was particularly dark for one reason. The reason why this bothered me more than it probably should have is because it was my fault. Now, it'd be very easy to look at this and say, well, John, the filter failed. It's not your fault, it's the filter's fault. No, that's not true. Because this probably happened early, like I said. This probably happened day one of me neglecting this aquarium. And so if I had not neglected the aquarium, if I had gone downstairs and I had checked on that tank, I would have said, oh, wait a minute. I always keep water moving really strong in my African tanks, and it's not moving in here, and it smells a little funky. What's going on in here? I would have noticed that that filter was not running, and I would have fixed the problem. If the filter was just dead and couldn't be repaired, I would put something else on there, whether it's a hang on the back filter or whatever it is. I would have gotten the water moving, and I would have gotten the filtration running in that tank, and I would have saved all of those fish. So it's absolutely my fault. If something like this happens, you cannot blame the equipment. Because again, if it happens, you're going to react to that broken equipment. You're not going to say, well, I have a 150-gallon tank with 50 fish in it. The filter broke, so I guess they're all going to die. No, instead, you're going to correct that problem, and you're going to save those fish. I didn't have the opportunity to do that. My fish didn't have the opportunity to be saved because I was neglecting those tanks. And that's why I say it's my fault. I say it's my fault because it was 100% my fault. We live in a world where everybody is looking to blame something, anything but themselves. If my fish died, it's because they were bad fish from the pet store, or because my filter broke. It's not my fault, it's the filter's fault. This is the world that we live in right now. Everybody's looking to point fingers somewhere, to blame anyone but themselves. And that's something I'm going to be completely honest with you, I'm really proud of myself for. I'm 48 years old. Boy, have I made a long list of mistakes. And I'm one of those people that will absolutely own up to those mistakes. And when I found this tank and I knew it was my fault, it was absolutely devastating to me. I had memories of Lisa and I looking into this little fry tank of these Africans that we had bred and fantasizing about starting a business, calling it KGTropicals, and breeding these fish to a large scale and selling them. It was so amazing to have those conversations. And 5 of the fish that died that day, that I killed that day, were in that tank that we were looking at when we were fantasizing about starting our business. I mean, that's how powerful this was, because I started having all of those memories and I realized this is my fault. And that makes it so much worse. The reason why we as fish keepers, and let's face it, everyone around the world concerning everything wants to blame something else, is because it makes it easier on us. We don't have to feel that guilt that, oh, it's my fault that these fish died. If we can blame the filter, if we can blame the city water, if we can blame anything but ourselves, it makes us feel better about it. And I'm going to say something right now that you may not understand. It's just something within me that hopefully can rub off on you, and you'll benefit from this too. I don't know how to say it, but I actually feel better when I accept the blame. I understand how weird that sounds, that if I blame myself, I can feel better about it. I don't understand the psychology behind it, but I do feel better when I understand this was my fault. I've learned from this. I'm not going to allow this to happen again. And so even though it's the most catastrophic thing I've ever dealt with, for some weird reason, I feel better about it. So listen, lesson learned from this story. Don't neglect your tanks. Don't neglect your tanks even for one day. If you are so completely overwhelmed that you don't have time to feed your fish on a Monday, because Mondays are your busiest days, that's not going to be the end of the world, but you still need to check on them. If you can't take the 12 seconds to throw some food in there, first of all, reassess your schedule, but if you can't spend that 12 seconds feeding your fish, at least check on them and make sure that everything's okay. Heater's on, temperature's right, the filter's running, fish are okay. Make sure of that. Because if you don't, you could have something catastrophic happen like I did. Your fish are not going to die. You are not being cruel to animals if you skip a day of feeding. In fact, it could be argued that that's good for them. And I do that every single week. None of my fish get fed except for the saltwater tank on Sundays. And that's because I want to clear them out. I want to give them a little bit of a break. It's not going to kill them if you let them go a day without feeding them. But it will kill them if you don't check to make sure that everything's copacetic. Maybe you're going to check your tank and you realize, wait a minute, the water's kind of cloudy. Oh no, there's an ammonia spike in there. You see that, you can react, and you can save your fish. So I understand life is overwhelming. I get it. But at least check on your fish every single day. If you are so busy that you can't feed your fish every day, you need to at least check your fish every single day. If it makes your life easier, get some of those little CChem alerts. We usually carry them on our website, but we haven't been able to get them lately. But those little alerts that you can put in there that you can check every day and make sure that everything is okay. You don't have to do a test. It's right there staring at you in the face. Use something like that to where you can at least monitor what's going on every single day. You don't have time to turn your lights on and off. Put them on timers. It's not a big deal to get some of this stuff automated for you, but you have to check them every single day. You might be able to save 50 lives like I wasn't able to do if you're able to check them every single day. That's my bit of advice for you today. Learn from my mistakes. Do not neglect your fish. Check them every single day. Make sure they're okay. And if you don't have time to feed your fish every day, check your schedule, because that's pretty sad, because it doesn't take that long to feed your fish. I understand if you're one of those people that has to prep your food and it's like you're making a Gordon Ramsay meal for your fish every single day. I understand if sometimes you don't have time for that, but daggone it, take some pellets and throw them in there. I mean, what's the big deal? It takes you 4 seconds. I've fed all of my fish in this conversation that we've had right now. It's not a big deal. So, but if you can't feed them for one day, that's fine, but still check on them, because if you don't, you could end up still walking around to this day with that guilt. It's been a long time. It's 6 years since this happened, and I'm still guilty about it. I'm mad at myself for it because I allowed that to happen. Not the filter, me. Don't kill your fish by being lazy and neglecting them. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.